Hello, my name is Uzair Kiani. I'm on the Faculty of Law of the Lahore University of Management Sciences, where I teach business law, torts, international law subjects, and law and economics. We've been working with the American Bar Association and both public and private entities within Pakistan to bring more emphasis and focus on business and human rights. We are very pleased and honored to have with us today Professor Dr. Surya Deva, who is one of the leading experts on business and human rights, has done extensive work, both research-based and advocacy-based, on understanding and implementing business and human rights and explicating the relationship between business enterprise and commercial activity and corporate activity and the effects that those can have on human rights. Professor Deva has run several trainings and regularly teaches classes on and publishes research on business and human rights. He is also the editor-in-chief of the Business and Human Rights Journal, which is an Oxfam journal, an Oxford University journal, I'm sorry, and a member of the editorial board on multiple related journals as well. Professor Surya also runs a course on business and human rights in collaboration with a cohort of experts as well as Oxfam. So we're very pleased to have him with us today, and we'll be asking him some questions to get his insights on how he understands and approaches business and human rights, how he would like it to develop, and what his experiences have taught him about how we can improve our own research and teaching in business and human rights in our various countries and various jurisdictions. So Professor Deva, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Begin,
my pleasure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So first of all, could you tell us about the challenges and the events and the background that actually led you to develop this interest in business and human rights?
Thank you. Thank you once again for the invitation. And it's really great to see that issues about business and human rights are picking up momentum in South Asia, in the Global South generally, which is very important. After I finished my LLM, I was more interested in issues about constitutional law. But then in the year 2000, I got a teaching position in the Bhopal Law School in India. And as you may know, Bhopal is the city where the infamous the Bhopal gas tragedy took place in 1984. And because of that, when I started teaching in the city of Bhopal at this law school, then I started looking at this dynamic that there can be a situation in which a company can violate human rights. And it is not the government that is violating human rights, so then it's a private entity. And in this particular case, it was the parent company was based in the US. And it was really difficult to hold the parent company accountable in this particular case. So I realized that this issue requires further investigation. And that triggered my interest in this field. And that led to my PhD in this particular field from University of Sydney. And then since then, I keep on working in this field. So it's almost 20 years now.
Thank you. So in terms of your experience, and you taught in multiple jurisdictions and multiple countries now, what do you think is the special importance of business and human rights teaching in South Asian countries?
Yeah, I think what we see increasingly is that the private sector, businesses, they are increasingly involved in delivery of public services. The many things which were done by the government earlier are done by the private companies. Even this interview we are doing because of the help of the private sector companies, right? So we can hardly do anything in today's world without the assistance, without the help of companies. Companies decide everything we do. What we eat, what we watch, how we travel or not travel, how we interact on social media, what we read, everything, everywhere there are businesses. Now, businesses can impact human rights, of course, in a positive manner. They create jobs, for instance. They create new innovative products and services. But businesses can also impact human rights in a negative manner. And I think that is where this issue of business and human rights is becoming more and more prominent in the last couple of decades. In South Asia, again, there are a significant role of business actors, but many businesses as well as the government officials are not fully aware of the responsibility of businesses. And I think that is where the importance and the role of such courses at universities become quite critical. I call it normally ABC. A is awareness, B is building capacity, and C is collaboration. So unless we start with this ABC, we cannot really expect businesses to respect human rights. So from that particular perspective, it is absolutely vital that we have BHR courses at different universities all across the board, including in South Asia. Now, of course, in South Asia, we also have the issue about the small companies and the informal sector, which are significant players, these informal sector companies. And I think our courses would have to take cognizance of these unique characteristics of South Asia.
Right. Thanks so much. So there was a lot of insight there, particularly on the issue of the privatization of traditionally public functions, because obviously states are bound by, typically bound by these multilateral conventions and treaties in ways that businesses aren't. So the more they privatize, the more complicated and encumbered human rights protection gets. So I think that that's an excellent point that we've been trying to emphasize as well. And the informal sector actually is something that we still need to work on how that would work and what kind of regime or what kind of protection we could bring there. And that is a huge issue, especially in Pakistan and I believe in India as well. So as you know, we're developing courses. We're just at an early stage yet. We had a pilot course at LUMS. So in terms of learning from your experience, what courses have you taught at City University, and which aspects of those do you think we could use to develop or enhance our courses?
Sure. I mean, I've taught a number of courses at City University. I've taught a course on law and gender and law of contract. But since 2007, I've also taught a course on business and human rights. This was one of the early courses anywhere in Asia, especially at a law school, because law schools are typically not known to teach a course on business and human rights. So my course takes cognizance of course, the legal regulation and initiatives, but it also deals with ethical issues. So it's a course which is, I would say, interdisciplinary in nature. And it's an elective course taken mostly by LLB students, but some JD students or LLM students also take it. And I have really enjoyed teaching this course over the years. It was informed by my research, of course. And so I grapple with three broad questions in this course. The first broad question is that why should businesses respect human rights? What are the legal or ethical or moral argument we can make about it? That is the first set of questions we discuss. The second is, let us assume that businesses have human rights responsibilities. The second question is, what is the nature and extent of these responsibilities? Are these legally binding? Are these moral responsibilities? Whether a company is responsible for the behavior of its subsidiary company or the suppliers in the supply chain, you know. So those are the issues that are quite relevant. And finally, how to enforce those responsibilities. So that is question about implementation and enforcement of whether these are domestic legislation or soft standards at the international level. So we discuss a range of issues, and I think case studies play a critical role. Case studies of things that have happened in the past, as well as the issues that are unfolding. I particularly use newspaper clippings in my course. So then course is very alive. What is happening around me at a given semester, I use those clippings in my course to make it very lively and link it to what is happening around us in society.
Yes, that's excellent advice, I think. And we did try to, in the pilot course, try to do some of that as well. And even there's some sting operation type TV shows, which at least in Pakistan, which kind of uncover unsavory business practices. So we try to incorporate some of that as well. So it's proved, but it's still a learning process, and we're still trying to regularize. So that's so we'll continue to learn from you. We do understand that you offer, and you recently did offer, a certificate course in business and human rights. So for the benefit of our students and prospective students and trainees who may be in business, what can you give us some details about that certificate course and whether it'll be offered virtually in the future, how people may be able to take it remotely and so forth?
So what happened that in 2016, I established HURBA, Human Rights and Business Academy. And the idea behind HURBA was to build capacity on a pro bono basis in the field of business and human rights in the global south. But what happened once I established this, I got appointed to the working group on business and human rights. So my time was really constrained after that appointment, but still I kept on offering at least this course once in a year. And initially we started offering this course on a 2-week basis. It was an in-person course that we hosted at Indian Law Institute in New Delhi. Then we realized perhaps 2 weeks is a bit long, and many students or the professionals are not able to spare 2 weeks at a stretch. So from 2017 onwards, we do this course Monday to Fridays. It's a 5-day course. And we invite a number of experts from different parts of the world. Because what I felt is that instead of sending the students to these experts, we bring the experts to students. That is the idea. And these are leading experts, but we don't charge anything in terms of tuition fees or anything. The only nominal amount they have to pay is to cover the administrative cost or something, food that we provide and all this. So that was in fact my precondition, that I will partner with any education institution, but you cannot make profit out of this course. So that was my desire, that I build capacity in the global south, but on a pro bono basis. Now, luckily, or it just happened that the COVID spread in 2020. And that created a dilemma for us. Do we do the course? Because it was supposed to take place in person, in fact, in the south of India this time, in Hyderabad. So we had decided everything, dates and collaboration with the law school there. But when the COVID situation started unfolding and we realized the pandemic will not be under control by the time, we normally do it in the month of July. So we decided to go virtual. And the response was phenomenal. We could reach thousands of students because in normal time, we could only take 50, 60 students in-person course. So that was a very positive experience. Students enjoyed it. We still did it Monday to Friday. A huge number of experts were invited who are practitioners as well as scholars from different parts of the world. Now, going forward, I think we may consider a hybrid model. A hybrid model is that if the pandemic is under control, it is possible that we may have some students who are able to attend in person, but we would definitely like to use the technology and reach out to wider audience. But it is very likely the course will be offered next year as well, and I'll be happy to provide more information in due course on that. Thank you.
Excellent. I think pro bono culture in particular is something that we need to continue to encourage in South Asia. It's quite common in a lot of common law jurisdictions, but here we found, in part because of this program, that it isn't as well understood that you do some things without any kind of direct compensation to you as a lawyer. And but I think it is, with these kinds of examples and precedents, there's going to be hopefully much more support and normalization of that. And I do encourage our students to take advantage of the certificate course when they're able to, and prospective students as well. So you have access to experts that otherwise you would not have essentially free of cost. Beyond the certificate course, or for people who can't take it, what kinds of resources or organizations can you suggest that people may reach out to or explore to learn more about business and human rights on their own?
Sure. I mean, one excellent website, perhaps the best website on business and human rights, is the website of the Business and Human Rights Resource Center. This is a freely available website. It is updated every day. and it has resource in multiple languages from all over the world. So I would say just go to that website, BHRRC website. This is excellent. In addition to that, the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights also has a website in which you can find plenty of guidance documents, reports on different thematic areas. And all these documents are again freely available in a soft format, I mean. So I will encourage that as well. You mentioned earlier the Business and Human Rights Journal, and that journal is also available online. Not every article is available online for free download, but many are. So I would encourage the students to also check out the Business and Human Rights Journal, which, by the way, which is an Cambridge journal, not Oxford. Cambridge University Press publishes
My
that.
apologies. Okay.
No, that's okay. And I think that has proved to be quite a successful journal, more than 5 years now. So I will mention these few resources to begin with. But of course, there's plenty of literature available on SSRN, which could be freely downloaded, or of course, the number of books and otherwise. In fact, that is part of my ambition or a plan that I would like to execute from next year. Perhaps I would like to create a resource bank for the Global South. And perhaps I can start with South Asia as a pilot. And let us see, because resources in the Global South are not available. Libraries cannot afford all the expensive journals. Some books are also they cannot purchase. So they have a competitive disadvantage, the students in the Global South. So how can people like us help mitigate this disadvantage?
Yeah, absolutely. And that just reinforces the point of making the certificate course available for free and highlighting free resources such as the Business BHR Resource Center, as well as free journal articles from your journal, as well as SSRN. So thank you for that. And I encourage our audience and students to explore these, especially in order to build a more thorough and research-based understanding of the issues. One of the books that we use in our course was John Ruggie's book. He was one of the early, he was also one of the early people to advocate for and come up with this concept of soft law UNGPs. So I think it was called Just Business. So that's also, it's conversational, but it's still useful in terms of getting some of the history. But coming to the UNGPs and the UN in general, you played a key role in organizing this virtual BHR conference recently. So we wanted to get your insights on what that experience was like, what the during, before, and after the organization of this virtual BHR forum.
Yeah. So the working group of which I'm part, we organize a very big annual forum in Geneva every year. This year, because of COVID, the forum will take place virtually during next month, in fact, 16th to 18th of November. But what we realized is that the people from all over the world cannot really come and participate in this forum in Geneva. It's very expensive. And the impact of this event in Geneva is limited on the ground. So what we then realized is that we should do more events at the local level in different regions of the world. So with that in mind, in the last few years, we started doing those events. So the event that you mentioned takes place in Bangkok in person. This year we did it virtually. And that event is for Asia Pacific, different regions, so the different countries in Asia Pacific can participate. We also started last year a South Asia event, which was held in New Delhi, and it was supposed to go to Nepal this year, but somehow because of the pandemic, we could not do it. But I can tell you that we plan to have that South Asia Forum in March 2021. It could be in the hybrid format or in the virtual format. And the Bangkok event will again take place in June 2021. I found these events useful from a number of perspectives. They raise awareness, they contribute to building capacity, they facilitate peer learning. They also tend to highlight the challenges that we still face and then exploring together the solutions that how we can overcome those challenges. So there are multiple objectives that could be served by participating in those particular events. And this year, the event was held virtually. That meant that people need not travel to Bangkok. They could just participate in from anywhere in Asia Pacific or in fact anywhere in the world. Of course, the time zone was an issue. Uh, but I think the experience, the feedback we received was very positive, and we hope to continue organizing such events in future. Every year, the theme and the focus of the event may vary, and we pick also different sessions focusing on different issues. Let us say we could do something on climate change, we can do something about gender-based violence, issues about supply chains, issues about environmental pollution, access to remedy, role of national human rights institutions. So there are a number of issues and areas we try to cover in these events. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, and in fact, our team was lucky to be able to attend several of the sessions in the last virtual forum. And one of the things that we noticed was a repeated theme or undercurrent was this emphasis on the role of human rights defenders, NGO type organizations, as well as the justice system, especially in the Asia Pacific region. And we wanted your input on whether you see it as an impediment that there aren't more binding instruments or binding laws that control business conduct that affects human rights. Or do you think that the legal regime as it exists requires some kind of a change, or is it just a matter of implementing what we already have or educating businesses?
Yeah. I think it's a combination of both. I think we need a better implementation of what we already have. There are a significant number of legislation in almost every country in the field of labor rights, human rights, environmental law, consumer protection, so on and so forth. So if the governments can implement those legislation more effectively, that will definitely promote business respect for human rights. At the same time, I think the soft standards like UN guiding principles on business and human rights, they're also important because they create a level playing field. That this is the basic minimum floor, as we call it, that every company anywhere in the world has to follow. But of course, as one would expect, everywhere there are certain businesses which may not be following these soft standards. And I think in that particular context, having a binding instrument at the international level should also be helpful. And that process started in 2014, it is ongoing. And in fact, the sixth session of that process of Intergovernmental Working Group will take place in the last week of October in Geneva. And I think, let us see how states respond to the latest draft. In my personal view, we should not see any conflict between voluntary and binding instruments, rather they can complement each other. We need both of them together to promote business respect for human rights. And I think a binding instrument could be very handy in the field of collaboration, because in some cases, the multinational is operating across the globe, and the laws of one particular country may not be really effective in those particular situations to hold the company accountable. So I think when it comes to defenders, we need to ensure that they have more civic space to raise legitimate concerns about human rights abuses, whether this is done by the government or by the private sector. And if their rights are protected through a binding law at the domestic level or a binding instrument at the international level, I think that would definitely be a welcome addition to what we already have.
Yes, absolutely. And interestingly, one of the things that we've been exploring more recently is the changes in civic space that you mentioned brought about by this COVID pandemic. So in Pakistan in particular, a lot of the space that you would typically have to engage civically in public spaces, such as it was, has shrunk even further. And there have been a lot of issues with the economic fallout that's hit especially the informal sector, but also the formal sector, very hard because of the lack of preparedness for COVID-19. And then there isn't the ability to organize as they otherwise would have to actually be able to remedy that. So those are excellent points again, and thank you for that. Now, when we teach the course, obviously we begin with the soft law approach of the UNGP. So the state's responsibility to protect, businesses respect, and then the right to a remedy, 3 pillars like that. But in terms of more recent developments of changes in BHR law or things that are upcoming, what can you tell us about the future of BHR lawmaking, both hard and soft?
Yeah. I mean, I see that the standards will continue to evolve. The soft standards will continue to evolve. And I think we might have sector-specific evolution of standards in certain fields. Let's say social media companies, right? So they have unique challenges that arise in the particular context. So the informal sector, you know. So I think we may need more specific sector-specific standards in future so that the companies know how they can respect human rights. So more practical and toolkits may be developed in future. I also see that these soft standards are increasingly becoming hard, especially in Europe. In 2017, the French government enacted a duty of vigilance law. Then the Dutch government enacted a law about child labor in the supply chain in 2019. Several countries like Norway, Germany, and other countries are considering to enact a similar law on mandatory human rights due diligence. But I think a game-changing event or a development that has taken place in Europe is that the European Commission has announced that they will introduce a mandatory human rights and environmental rights due diligence legislation in 2021. Now that will apply to entire Europe. So instead of having a piecemeal approach, which may vary from country to country, we might have a legislation which will apply across Europe in next couple of years. Now this legislation is going to be a game changer because it will definitely apply to European companies, but it will also apply indirectly to other companies, let us say companies in India or Pakistan. If they're supplying to Europe, they would have to satisfy the rules and regulations. So this legislation in Europe will have extraterritorial effect, very likely. And that would mean that businesses and the governments in South Asia or in the global South as such, they would have to take their human rights responsibilities more seriously going forward. Otherwise, there could be implications in terms of what things they can sell or provide services in Europe.
Excellent. So I think this European factor of required human rights due diligence, I think that's definitely something that would be a leading candidate to incorporate into our future courses. Even the draft version right now, just because it sounds like an amazing idea. We had something similar with the European privacy legislation that happened a couple of years ago that had global impact, not just anyone who was based in Europe, but any information that was passing through Europe. So that a similar effect would happen here. In fact, a lot of the treaties that were signed also had in Pakistan initially, a lot of the human rights treaties that were signed had a very close link to business, in the sense that one of the carrots for that was GSP plus status for export to Europe. So there, which we also included the last time we discussed that as an issue. But in Pakistan, one of the typical problems, and this isn't just about business and human rights, is that, okay, we sign some treaties, we make some laws, and then there are hurdles to implementation. And you will find on paper many countries, I think in South Asia, where the laws look fantastic, but then you step outside and it doesn't seem like you're seeing what you should be expecting given what the law is. So what are your suggestions of and hopes about implementation of existing laws and future BHR laws? Are there things that we could do that could improve implementation? Do you worry about how these new developments like the European ones will be implemented in the future? And what would be your advice to us regarding this?
Yeah, I would go back to the point I earlier made. and that is about raising awareness and building capacity on the ground. I think the socialization of standards in the field of business and human rights is very vital. I think consumers, businesses, employees, employers, investors, everyone should know that there are these standards that they are expected to follow in different ways. So merely the old model of regulation in which the government has this command and control idea, that alone is not going to be sufficient in the 21st century. And I think that's where the idea of bottom-up approaches of regulation and building capacity, because I find in many cases, people are not even aware of their rights, or they don't know that companies should do ABC in terms of human rights due diligence, right? So if a company does not do it, a worker cannot really challenge the manager, oh, you should be doing this, right? I think that is the difficulty. So if we can create this awareness and build capacity on the ground, then I think they could play a more proactive role in ensuring that the governments as well as businesses do what they should be doing. To me, that is the focus. And because I believe in this idea of change in this way, that explains why I started this idea of the pro bono course.
Right, absolutely. And I think social media has both a positive and a negative side, but I think there is there is some positive potential in awareness building because of these the proliferation of media as well. And we've seen some good effects of that as well. So I think we've learned a lot, both in terms of the research, the background, and the future directions of business and human rights. I particularly want to highlight the ideas for building the course that we got from Professor Deva. I strongly recommend his Business and Human Rights Journal, Cambridge Journal, and as well as the other resources that he mentioned, including the websites, and this idea of making the course always current in terms of getting what's around at the time. There's always things going on in terms of newspaper clippings and YouTube videos and so on and so forth. So I think that again is a very important element to ensuring that students maintain interest in what's happening. So I want to thank you again very much for your time, Professor Deva, and we hope to continue to engage with you in the future as a number of law schools, including our own, continue to build our business and human rights curriculum. And have a wonderful rest of the week, and we'll hopefully see you again in one of your trainings.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I congratulate you and American Bar Association for taking this initiative to build capacity at some of these universities in Pakistan. Please count on my support, and I'll be happy to collaborate in different ways going forward. And hopefully I can visit Pakistan someday and interact with your students.
Absolutely, that's the plan, and we have let's hope that day comes sooner rather than later. We'd love to have you here.
Okay, you take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks.